did you have like plenty of supplies? What do you mean by supplies?
Well, supplies well, there's a rifle as a supply, clothing,
So yeah.
blankets, shovel, everything like that. Yeah, I think we were well equipped. We had everything that we were supposed to have. We weren't shy of anything. We had all of our weapons, and we had plenty of clothing and to keep us warm.
Yeah.
And food, the whole darn thing. We had rations that we took with us, and if we, the rations were K rations or C rations, and C rations were in cans, and then K rations were in boxes. And the K rations were probably the beginning of sort of like frozen foods. They weren't frozen, but they were the beginning of that. You could make a meal out of them. Mm-hmm. And we had one guy, in fact, my friend Higginbottom, during the winter storms in Belgium, he mixed snow with a melted chocolate bar to make ice cream with, you know. And the chocolate bar was part of the food, but we were not to eat that until we got stranded and had nothing else to eat. Yeah. And that was a instant type of food that would keep you going for a little while. Yeah. You'd take 2 or 3 bites, you know, and it was hard as a brick, but you could eat it, and it was tasted all. Sometimes we ate them anyway, you know. Yeah. Because they were good. It was sweet.
So, did you feel any like pressure or stress?
Well, I suppose when you get in an airplane and you're flying around, you want to make sure the plane lands fine, or if you're jumping out of an airplane, if you want to be able to know that you're going to land, get your chute opens, number one, and number two, the most important thing is what they train you for is landing, because you're coming down at a pretty good clip. Yeah. And you want, if you don't, because a lot of broken legs and what have you, but yeah, that's a little stressful, but I think the first jump was probably the most stressful. You don't know what's going to happen, but once you did that way, then you know that you're gonna what's gonna happen. It's just a matter, and it's altogether different today. In those days, when you jumped out of a plane, they had propellers on the planes, and the blast from the propeller, once you jumped out, the chute would come out, and the blast of the wind would open them up in a big snap and jerk you like crazy, but that way you knew the chute was open. And you had a spare chute that was on the front of you. In case that one didn't open, you could open it and yourself if you had time to open it up, and and it would open up, okay?
Where was the first place you were deployed? Sorry, where was the first place you were deployed by parachute, like in Germany, overseas? Like not during training, but like, what was your first experience with having to jump out of a plane and go straight into combat?
Where was it? Like, where was your first experience of jumping out of a plane?
Most what?
Where was it? Like your.
Well, actually, I don't think you did. So, Grandpa, when you went into battle in Belgium.
Oh, we didn't.
You never jumped or never did a glider. You were actually you never actually parachuted into any place. Into Germany when you were over in Europe. When you went into battle, you were taken to the front by vehicle, correct? You didn't fly in and jump in, did you?
No, we flew in from England.
Right, but you never flew out. You never, even though you were trained paratrooper.
That was all by truck. We moved up by truck into the battle zone. Right. Yes. Right.
So even though you were a trained paratrooper and a glider pilot, you never actually did that in combat. You only did that in training. That's the only time that you actually parachuted and did the gliders was in training and not in combat.
That's right. Yeah. Well, we didn't do that. We couldn't because of the weather. Right. Mm-hmm. But then later that happened with the division. Yes, they did.
Okay, so was there something special you did for good luck?
Special for good luck? No, I guess the main thing is when you're in harm's way, I guess you pray. That was, I mean, that's probably the biggest thing is where else do you have to go, you know?
Yeah.
But, for good luck, I was not ever one that thought something gave you good luck, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe the good luck piece I had was what that Belgian lady gave me, okay?
So how do people entertain themselves?
Entertainment?
Yeah.
Well, entertainment, where are you at? Okay. Well, I think sometimes some of the antics that the guys happen, all of us would go through some funny things, you know, making fun of certain things and that kind of stuff. But I guess that ice cream thing was probably a place to entertain you. It's something different, you know.
Yeah.
You tried, a lot of people smoked in them days, and they'd get condemned for smoking, especially at nighttime when you could see the lighter and also the ashes, the ash, you know, the red ash.
Yeah.
But I don't know, funny things, how they entertain themselves. You don't entertain, you entertain yourselves by sleeping, I guess. Trying to sleep and that would be it. The entertainment is, well, even marching. If you're marching, you all might, when you're moving back or something like that, and you're in a group marching back by getting away, you might have a few little songs or something they sing, you know, marching songs or something like that, you know. Some of them that you guys wouldn't want to hear about, okay. But, no, that would be it. You'd drag along. And
so did you guys ever come along any catches of wine or alcohol when you were moving along through villages? Because obviously you never...
Oh yeah, well I forgot to mention that when we went over to the 101st Airborne that night, they had gotten into a cognac factory, a warehouse, and they had all kinds of cognac. And they said, take all you want and go back to camp. Well, we loaded ourselves down and we passed it out to our company commander loved his drinks, so we got him one first, and then we got what we had, we left out. And I think there weren't any really many sober guys in the camp that night. That's right, I forgot. The good stuff was Hennessy cognac. It was really good.
So, did I ask what did you do when on leave yet? I don't think I asked that. What did you do when you were on leave?
Well, in England we didn't do too much. We did, but it wasn't entertaining. We took trucks. They took us into, some of us into London, and we moseyed around Piccadilly Circus. Was that what they call it? Yeah. I think I got it right. And it was an entertainment place. Even where it had been bombed out, they figured they made other places out. When later on, when I was in France, and I pulled back and went in the hospital there, come out of the hospital, nurse said one day for a couple of us, you can go into town, into the Paris. We took the metro into Paris, and just bummed around, looking at this, looking at that, and visited the cafes and that kind of thing, and that's where we, I think we even we had time to go in to see a show. Then was that later? It was, yeah, we went in to see a show, and at the what they call it, forget the name of the place. And, yeah, but that was the kind of stuff you did. We did have well, it wasn't on leave. We weren't on leave. When you're over there, you're not on leave. You know. But in England, when we were there, in our regiment, they had a dance, and they brought in ladies from the local camps, you know, they came in and they had a dance and that kind of stuff, and we had, that's an interesting thing, because we had, our cooks had set up food for the night and entertainment, and a couple of three girls that were at our table, one of them, they said, the mess sergeant fixed them up with big slabs of cheese, you know, and they didn't eat it, and we said, how come you're not eating your cheese? He said, well, we want to take that home and share with our family, you know, and they did. They all three of them took big pieces of cheese home and bread, so that they could share it with their family and their sisters and brothers or whatever they had, you know, some of them older ones, you know.
So, where did you travel while in the service?
Well, you go wherever you're assigned to go, but wherever your division goes, and the travel, like I told you, I was up in Edinburgh, Scotland. That was the only travel I had overseas. You're back home, you travel home to go back home, you know,
I think he meant what countries. What countries were you in with your company? So you started in England, and then you went from England.
Well, England and France and Luxembourg and Belgium and Germany. I was in Germany for a little bit.
So,
From Germany.
do you do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual event? I mean, I know the guy tried to make ice cream with the chocolate bar in the snow, but other than that,
I think I mentioned the one about Tony, my friend Tony Hagel, who was on duty for 3 days.
yeah.
He just did that because he was ornery enough to say, hey, I'll stay here a little bit, maybe, you know. That was probably the most. There's been some other situations where were very humorous, not necessarily overseas, but.
Yeah, what about training? I think you have some times in your basic training or all your training or teaching experiences. Do you remember any stories at all that were particularly?
Well, we had one soldier that his name was Naguki. That was his last name, Naguki. Would you believe that? And he was the most humorous type of guy there ever was, because he couldn't keep in step. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. And he'd always be. We would go on a march or doing something going along. He'd fall out. He'd say, "Oh, I can't make it. I can't make it." Well, anyway, they tried to fix him up doing this and doing that. It didn't work. But anyway, finally, he got into camp, and they took him into the hospital, and he got into one of these padded cells or whatever it was, and he's bumping his head up against it and all. But they say, I don't know. Well, you know, he was from Cleveland, where I was from, and I come home on a furlough. This is while we were still in the States, and when I went home on a furlough once, and I was downtown Cleveland, and you know, I bumped into Naguki, and he was just as normal as a guy could ever be. So he got out of the service because of that, and whether he faked it or not, I don't know, but we sort of surmised that he did.
So, how did you observe Christmas and other holidays?
Well, the only Christmas that I was over there was when I was here in the States. Of course, if you were entitled to come home, you get a furlough to come home. But I did that once or twice, but maybe once anyway. But overseas, we were in Belgium, in the foxhole on the 25th of December of 1945. So that's where I spent Christmas. Other holidays were. Oh, we did have a Thanksgiving holiday in England, in November of 44, I'm sorry, and Thanksgiving Day, and there was 3 or 4 guys in our company that went on pass, and they went out into town, in Chiselton or wherever it was, and the rest of us were in town, and cooks had made up a beautiful, beautiful Thanksgiving dinner, turkey and all the trimmings, you know. Well, everybody ate like they was out of style, because it was one of the unusual things you got in the service. Well, that night, it was all of a sudden, we lived in these pyramidal tents, and we had a wooden sidewalk going along to go to the latrine, and they were honey buckets really, but anyway, a big long list of them. Well, anyway, people started to develop diarrhea. Okay, well, just about everybody got diarrhea, and I was in tent with Howard, my friend Howard Higginbottom and I, and a couple others, and we said, oh, Howard got it. And I said, well, I'm never gonna get it. Well, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, it hit me. So I was one of the last to get it. Well, the next morning, the place was all, the lieutenant lined us all up and they gave us stuff for it, you know, some kind of medications. But then the guys that come in from that night or the next morning, from being on furlough or on the furlough was to go into town, get a pass to go into town. They come in and they were what is known, they were put on the poop detail, okay? And they had to go around and pick up all what was in the yard and take it into the latrine. So they didn't win out after all.
Oh no.
Nice. So, do you have like photographs?
Yes, I had a number of photographs of the beginning when I first went into service, and was in the 101st, even in the 82nd, and then the 101st, and then the 17th, and I had those photos. Yes, I had those, and a lot of the guys, and we had our company pictures in both divisions. Yes, we had a lot of photographs.
Who are the people in the photographs?
Well, mostly my buddies in the service and my company, mostly in my company, because you're very much involved with the company. And I was involved with, very much so, being with them, and I was assigned to supplies also. I got involved in supply, and I got to know everyone of their name, Howard and I did, and we got to do that. That was an extra duty we had. So Howard was considered our armor artificer, and that was a guy who took care of just about anything. And he could build boxes, and he could repair rifles and do all that kind of stuff. So he was a pretty good asset to us. Right. So we did have photographs, yes, and he's involved out of them.
Okay. So, what did you think of like the officers or your like fellow soldiers?
Well, we had probably the best officers I can think of. As far as our battalion was concerned, there's several companies that we had. We had company A, B, and C, and D, E, and F, and we didn't have G and H. No, we didn't have G and H. And but they were all good guys. One of the officers who was actually had command of the first platoon. I was next to him when he was killed during that big battle we had. He was a great guy, and you know the funny part of it was that he had a daughter who was born about the same date your grandma was born in 1945. So he never got to see her at all, of course. And we went to one of the reunions, and somehow we found someone come in and sees, "Are you Sergeant Widdows?" She said, "I seen your picture next to him in a company photograph," and she says, "And I recognize you." And I said, "Yes." And she says, "You were with my father." said, yes. Here it was his daughter, same age as your grandma. And what a big thing. What a big thing. She came to many of our reunions, and she had gotten married, and all her name was Robinson or something like, I think it was Robinson now. I've got pictures of her and all that, so that was one of the officers who was a great guy. And other soldiers, yes, we got the Howard Higginbottoms, we got the Lindsays, we got the, Lindsay went over with us, there was another guy, his name was Whistler, Lyman Whistler. He was 38 when he came in our outfit, and he became 39 when we were overseas. He got out of the service. He was too old. They said, hey, you don't have to go. He says, I want to go. He was the platoon sergeant, 2nd platoon. And he lived until about the last couple of days of the war, and a sniper got him in Germany. So that was it. Lyman was a great guy too. It's one of those things just happened. He lasted too long, you know, with him, brought his platoon through and all that, and that was it. So very, very close to him. And there was another guy by the name of Turner, Van A. Turner, we called him. Van A., how are you doing? You know, and he was a platoon sergeant. And he lived in Cleveland. I didn't know it until I come back from the service, and hadn't talked to him for many, many years. And all winter, somewhere along the line, someone found out he lived on the east side of Cleveland, East Lake or somewhere out there. And we got together, and I went over to him. We visited, and him and his wife, and his wife then finally came, and him, we came to the reunions. And then it wasn't long after that he passed, and he was a young, good-looking guy, and too bad that he passed so quickly. But he was one of the good guys too, and he was a hell of a platoon sergeant, really good, really good. And I was attached to the headquarters at that time too, involved in the supply and platoon. And they'd all, and he was on our cadre, Whistler was. We had some other guys. They were sergeants and section leaders of the platoon, you know, weapons platoon and the other platoons, and they came in. They were young guys, but they're nice guys, good guys. They were corporals and buck sergeants, and they all, some of them attended our reunions, but too bad they've all gone, and here I am, plugging along here yet, for a little bit anyway. Who knows?
So, do you recall the day your service ended?
Well, yeah, I had come back from the service. I moved from, when I left my company because I had so many points. You have points when you, the amount of years you're in the service, and the amount of months rather, whatever it was, and you had yourself, and you had a wife who was what do they call it, and I had a baby, and you know, I had a young lady, your grandma, and you got paid a little extra money for all that. You got paid extra money for going overseas too, and yeah, that's what was that you were saying again? I was.
The day that you remember?
Oh, while I was in the service. Okay, well, yeah. Well, then.
Like, where were you?
Waited. Why I was in Paris was because we were going to Le Havre, which is on the coast of Paris, where the ships came in, and they had camps there where they'd bring you in so they could rotate you back to the States and put you on a ship. Well, they called them by a cigarette name, Lucky Strike, Chesterfield, and Old Gold, and that. Well, I was assigned to go to Camp Lucky Strike, and well, eventually there was a guy, a senator from Ohio, named Senator Taft, and because the Pacific War was still on, our division was going to be going over to, once they got back to the States, was gonna be assigned to go over to the Pacific and get that war over with, because the European war was over in April of 45, and still going on over in thing when the division was drawn back, and of course the war had ended there, and that's when we ended up. Well, the division was terrible, because when our division was brought back, well, the war was over. We were in Germany, but we were in a place called Mulheim on the Rhine, and it was a beautiful place. All the Germans waited on us hand and foot, and it was a resort area, and I think it was called that. I forget now, but it was pretty close. But anyhow, I got on the ship eventually, and it took us 17 days to cross the Atlantic.
Wow.
And when we were coming over, it only took 7 days. We were on a big ship, we had 3,500 troops aboard, and we zigzagged all the way over. Every 7 minutes you had to change course, because the U-boats or submarines, and the German submarines in those days couldn't line you up in seven minutes, did I say? Right, okay. And going back 17 days on a little Liberty ship, and we had about 650 on board, plus, and that was it. And I guess probably the most exciting thing about it all was we went into New York Harbor, and when I saw the Statue of Liberty, we passed it in that little ship. Seeing that Statue of Liberty made you really feel, well, the battle was all worthwhile. This is our country and our freedoms and what have you. And that was one impressive sight to see. And then we got on a train and we went to a depot in Pennsylvania. Oh, I should remember the name of it. Do you think I can remember it? No, but it's around Allentown, where the horseshoe curve in the railroad is. But we stayed there a few days, and they mustered you out. They gave you a ticket, train ticket, to go home. And I got on a train one night, and when I was released, and got on the train from Pennsylvania into Cleveland, and got off about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went to see my wife and my new baby, and got to see them for one long period of time. Well, that was it. So that was the end. But that was the end, I guess, of the military service, and that was it.
So, did you work or go back to school after?
Yeah, I went back to where I had been working before, and I did go back for a little period of time, but then I moved out of there and went someplace else eventually. Yes, I did that.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill? What is the GI Bill exactly?
I didn't do it on just a limited basis. I took some home courses and that. I was married, had a child, couldn't get away, and they gave us an allowance, but it wouldn't have been enough to maintain a family, you know. Anyways, but I did, and then I went on later and took courses, individual courses to what eventually became my profession.
Okay. So, did you make any close friendships while in service? Didn't you answer that already?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. You answered that already. It's okay. So, did you continue any of those relationships with any other people?
I'm sorry?
Did you continue any of those relationships with any other people?
Oh, yes. Oh, well, I told you before, Howard was my real close friend. We were close from about a year after we got back, from then on until the end. Right. Bryce, we were very close with him, and I was close, well, not what you call real close, but friends, of course. Some of the guys that we'd see at the reunions and that type of thing, but I guess the convenience of Howard living in the same state as I, and he was the closest one, right? And some of the others that we got involved with in our annual reunions that we had, right, yes.
Yeah. So did you join a veterans organization?
Yes, I'm a life member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, right. And the Veterans of Foreign Wars is, you can't get into that unless you've seen overseas duty and combat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Kind of. So, what did you go on to do as a career after the war? Like, what did you do for a job?
Well, eventually, I ended up getting involved in transportation. I worked initially at what railroads, ticketing and reservations and passenger reservations and all for the railroads in downtown Cleveland. And that eventually put me into transportation, and that's where I went on and got involved in freight transportation. And that's where I ended up becoming traffic managers for several big, large corporations.
So, did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about, like, the military in general?
Well, sure. Sure it has. Like, yes, it has. I don't know how it would influence me, my thinking about war. Sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would be. I guess it's just whether who wants war, but again, it's a matter of military experience would tell you if there's a purpose or a reason for it, yes. But try to avoid war wherever possible.
What kind of activities does your post or association have for your veterans organization?
Well, the Veterans of Foreign Wars is my local post. I was involved in. We had what we call an honor guard, and it's an honor guard that goes to funerals, and raises the rifles and raises the flag and shoots the 21 volley for every veteran that asks for it or wants it. And that's a sort of a recognition of their service. And we'd go to all of rain or shine. We would go out in cemeteries and do that. We also would give a ceremony in their funeral homes if the people want it, you know, and that type of thing. Right? But that's one of the things. But we did a lot of other things. We also go out on Memorial Day every year and decorate the graves with flags in our cemeteries that are nearby. We do other things. We help veterans out. And many other little things, mostly veterans and that type of thing. And definitely have to take care of our own if we need to. One of our veterans are in bad shape. Why we do it? You know, we help them out.
Do you attend their unions then?
Yes, we do. We had the 17th Airborne Division Association. We attended it for many, many years, but here about 3 or 4 years ago, we were in Virginia. That had to be 5 or 6 years ago. That had to be in what, 07?
And when was that?
What?
6 maybe.
We went to
Or
last
7.
Virginia? It was your
Our division
freshman
had to
year.
be disbanded.
2006 then.
The people that were running it, and we had really a good reunion, but it was certainly disbanded and had to be given up as an organization because of the fact that all the guys that were involved anymore were in their 80s, so it was just too much for them, and they did one heck of a job all along, all those many years.
Yeah.
But they were a great group, and they still have what they call little groups around the country that get together once in a while. There's one in Ohio, but it's gotten down to there's hardly anybody left anymore.
Yeah.
And they have one in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but once a year. But I haven't been able to go to that. But it's they have a few more people there yet, but they're dwindling.
Well, when we went to that one, the 50th.
The
and then-
Virginia one?
And then we went to the one on the riverboat in Kentucky. Remember, Bryce,
Couple
when you
years
were little?
before.
You were really little, we went dancing on the riverboat. So you
I remember going to the Virginia one with Connor.
Mm-hmm.
So how did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, I guess it would be give you, give you what experiences you had would certainly make you feel that life is a great thing to have, and freedom is a great thing to have. And we're none of us perfect, and no nation is perfect, but we've got the best there is, and we had to keep it that way, and I think so far we've done that. And but they say that we had a great generation, our group of people, and I think it's experiences is, I don't know, service is something that everybody should do. Experiences would affect you would be that it's the influence it would have on your life, personal life, right?
So is there anything you would like to add that we haven't talked about?
Well, no, you covered it pretty well, young man. My great-grandson, you're doing great.
Thank
I just, you ask these tough questions, it's hard for this old mind to grasp.
Tell us about your friend who ended up going to Berchtesgaden and giving you a piece of Edelweiss. Tell Bryce that story.
Well, I have a good friend in the 101st Division, and he was a sergeant. I was only a private in the PFC and eventually a corporal, but he was, I think we were real good friends. And he eventually became a master sergeant. And while I was in Paris waiting to come home, well, he came up in a Jeep, come all the way from the border of Austria and France, and came up, and he took me and another friend of mine, down to Berchtesgaden. That was Hitler's hideaway in the mountains in Austria, which is right across the border in France. And we went there. We did, the 101st was the ones that was there maintaining it from the Germans. And I didn't get into the big building itself, but I got in some of the surrounding things there. And everything was in bloom. This was had to be in June. June, I think it was, first part of June. And Edelweiss is a flower that was all the bloom on the mountaintops and all over the mountain. It's just all one white series of whiteness. It's like snow, only it was different color, light color. So I picked one of those and put it in a little envelope or whatever it was, and brought it home with me. I saved that to say that at least it was there. He had gotten, when he left there later, he had gotten a few things from Berchtesgaden, dishes and that, and he came out to visit us once, great-grandma and me, and he brought, he didn't bring anything. He said he was down to visit his sister, him and his wife were down to see his sister in Cincinnati area, and he